What happens when they hand you a chained alien woman as a joke? When your old commander smirks and calls her your trophy, I cut her chains in front of everyone. Now we're hunted across the stars, and I'm about to discover what freedom really costs. I still remember the day they brought her to me. The battle had just ended. The air still smelled of plasma discharge and burning metal. My hands were black with carbon residue, and my ears rang from the constant barrage of artillery. Command had summoned me to some makeshift awards ceremony. Unofficial, of course. Nothing about what we did here would ever make it into any official record. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a handshake, a hollow "job well done" from officers who'd never set foot on the battlefield. But when I walked into that repurposed cargo base, something felt off. The soldiers' faces, too many smiles. Not the relieved grins of survivors, but the cruel smirks of people about to witness something entertaining. Corn stood at the center. My old friend, now Major Corn Delaney, decorated hero of the Outer Rim campaigns. We joined up together 10 years ago, full of ideals and promises about making the galaxy safer. Now he wore the polished insignia of someone who gave orders rather than followed them. "Dre," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come forward." I approached cautiously. The circle of soldiers parted, and that's when I saw her. Blue-tinted skin that seemed to shimmer under the harsh lights. Eyes so dark they looked like twin black holes. Humanoid, but with subtle differences. Longer limbs, fingers with an extra joint. A graceful neck that curved at an impossible angle. An alien. A Viridian. One of the enemy, according to our mission briefings. She knelt on the ground, hands bound by neural cuffs. The kind that send pain signals directly to the brain if you resist. Her head was bowed but not in submission, in waiting. Like a predator conserving energy. "Your trophy," Corn announced, and the room erupted in laughter. "The last prisoner from the Southern Quadrant. She's diplomacy class, I'm told. High value. A resonance empath." Someone whistled. Another voice called out, "Let's see how she survives with a killer." More laughter. They all knew my reputation. The things I'd done during the past 3 years since Corn had left me for dead on Daris 9. The missions I'd taken that no one else would touch. Corn pushed her forward, and she stumbled, falling at my feet. She didn't make a sound, but I saw her shoulders tense, bracing for whatever came next. "What am I supposed to do with her?" I asked, my voice flat. Corn shrugged. "Whatever you want. She's yours now. Call it a thank you for clearing out that last pocket of resistance." I looked around the room at the faces of men and women I'd fought alongside. Not one of them saw what was wrong with this. Not one. They'd all gone numb to it, or maybe they were always like this and I just hadn't noticed. I knelt down in front of her. She flinched almost imperceptibly. Up close, I could see the delicate patterns etched into her skin. Birthmarks or cultural symbols, I couldn't tell. She raised her eyes to meet mine, and I saw nothing there. No fear, no anger, no pleading, just emptiness. The look of someone who'd been hollowed out. "What's your name?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, then replied in perfect English, her voice melodic despite its flatness. "Eileen." I nodded and stood up. Without warning, I drew my combat knife, the one I'd carried through 3 war zones. The room tensed. I could feel Corn's hand hovering near his sidearm. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at the neural cuffs on Evelyn's wrists. With one clean slice, I cut through the control matrix embedded in the bands. The cuffs fell away, useless now. "What the hell are you doing, Dre?" Corn demanded, stepping forward. I turned to face him, putting myself between him and Elaine. She walks free or I walk away. The silence in that cargo bay was absolute. I could hear the distant hum of the station's generators, the soft ping of cooling metal. Corn's face flushed dark red. "This isn't a joke," he said through clenched teeth. "She's military intelligence, property of the Allied system." "She's a person," I replied, "and she doesn't belong to anyone." I felt Eileen rise behind me, felt her presence like a shadow at my back. Still, she said nothing. Corn glanced around at the other soldiers looking for support, but they were all suddenly interested in the floor, the ceiling, anywhere but this confrontation. None of them wanted to take a side. Finally, he laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Fine, take her. I hope she kills you in your sleep. I turned to Elena. Let's go. She followed me out of the cargo bay past the silent ranks of soldiers. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes on us. Some curious, some disgusted, some perhaps secretly relieved that someone had finally done what they couldn't bring themselves to do. My ship was docked at the edge of the colony, a converted long-range scout vessel I'd won in a card game on Tourist Station. Not much to look at from the outside, but she had a good heart and didn't ask questions. Perfect for a man like me. Eileen boarded without hesitation, moving carefully like someone accustomed to navigating unfamiliar territories. She stood just inside the airlock waiting for instructions, her eyes taking in every detail of the cramped interior. It's not much, I said, closing the hatch behind us, but it's clean and it flies. She nodded but said nothing. You can have the rear cabin, I continued, pointing down the narrow corridor. Bathrooms to the right, galleys up front, help yourself to whatever you find. We'll be breaking orbit in about 6 hours. She looked at me, then her dark eyes searching my face. Where are we going? It was the first thing she'd said since telling me her name. Her voice had a quality to it I couldn't quite place, like hearing someone speak underwater. Beautiful but distant. Away from here, I replied. Beyond that, I haven't decided yet. You got any preferences? She seemed startled by the question, as if no one had ever asked for her input before. Maybe they hadn't. No, she said finally. Away is sufficient. I nodded. Way it is then. I showed her to the cabin, a small room barely large enough for a bunk in a storage locker. She entered and stood in the center looking lost despite the confined space. Get some rest, I told her. We've got a long flight ahead. She didn't respond, and I left her there, returning to the cockpit to prepare for departure. I didn't hear her move for hours. When I finally went to check on her, I found her sitting exactly where I'd left her, staring at the wall. She didn't speak again for 3 days. Moved through the ship like a ghost, eating little, sleeping less from what I could tell. She maintained the distance between us with elegant precision, never too close, never too far. Always watching, always listening. I didn't push. I knew what it was like to be broken down and rebuilt for someone else's purpose. Knew what it was to have your choices taken away. So I gave her the only thing I could, space and silence. On the 4th night, as we drifted through the Corella Nebula, I found her in the observation deck. It wasn't much, just a small bubble of reinforced glass extending from the ship's hull, but it offered an unobstructed view of the cosmos. She stood with her palms pressed against the glass, watching the swirling clouds of cosmic dust illuminate with bursts of radiation. The blue light played across her features, making her skin glow like some deep-sea creature. I cleared my throat to announce my presence, but I knew she'd already sensed me. Residents empaths always knew when they weren't alone. It's beautiful, she said quietly, not turning around. In all of my travels as a diplomatic courier, I was never allowed to simply look. I stepped up beside her, keeping a respectful distance. The nebula's ionized particles interact with the ship's shield harmonics, creates the light show. I know how it works, she replied. That doesn't make it any less beautiful. We stood in silence for a while, watching the dance of light and shadow. Finally, she turned to face me. Why did you unchain me? She asked, her dark eyes searching mine. The question hung between us, heavy with all the things we hadn't said. I could have given her a dozen answers, about morality, about dignity, about basic decency, but in the end there was only one truth that mattered. Because no one else would, I said, simply. She held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded as if I'd confirmed something she'd suspected. Your friend, the one who gave me to you, you hate him. It wasn't a question. Of course it wasn't. She could feel my emotions probably better than I could myself. We have history, I said, turning back to the nebula. He left you to die, she stated flatly. I felt the resentment when he was near you. Old wounds that never healed properly. I laughed, a short, harsh sound. That's a neat trick. It's not a trick, she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. It's what I am, what they made me to be. And what's that exactly? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. A resonance empath is someone who can feel the emotional signatures of others. Not just surface emotions, but the deeper currents beneath. Fear hiding behind anger, joy masked by stoicism, truth draped in lies. She paused. We were rare among my people, valued for our abilities in diplomacy and negotiation. Until the war, I guessed. She nodded. Until the war, then we became tools. Ways to extract information, to break prisoners, to inflict precise emotional pain. Her fingers traced patterns on the glass. They would put me in rooms with captives and force me to amplify their worst memories, their deepest fears, again and again until there was nothing left of who they were. The horror of what she was describing settled in my gut like a cold stone. I'd seen the aftermath of such interrogations. Empty shells of people reduced to mumbling wrecks. You were a weapon, I said softly. I was a weapon, she agreed. One that could not be aimed at will. One that had no choice but to fire when ordered. Korn was my commanding officer on Daris 9. I said, surprising myself by volunteering the information. We were sent in with a small team to extract a high-value target. Things went south. Fast. Enemy forces had us pinned down in an abandoned mining complex. I could feel her attention shift, focusing entirely on me. Not just listening to my words, but to the emotions behind them. Korn received new orders directly from command. The extraction was scrubbed. We were to deploy a tactical EMP and withdraw immediately. I closed my eyes, remembering. The EMP would fry the life support systems in the sector where civilians were sheltering. Thousands of innocent people. You refused, Elan said softly. I nodded. I said we needed to warn them, give them time to evacuate. Korn disagreed, said the mission parameters had changed, that orders were orders. The memory was so clear, young. Standing in that bombed-out control room, dust floating in shafts of light, the distant sound of artillery pounding our position. When I tried to transmit a warning, he shot me. My hand unconsciously went to the scar on my side. Left me for dead while he and the rest of the team extracted. The last thing I heard him say was that he'd list me as killed in action. A hero's death. But you survived, Aline observed. A bitter smile crossed my face. Barely. A group of local miners found me, patched me up with whatever medical supplies they could salvage. By the time I was strong enough to travel, the Alliance had pulled out of the sector entirely, written it off as a strategic loss. I turned away from the nebula, leaning against the bulkhead. When I finally made it back to Allied space 6 months later, I found out Korn had been promoted. The official report listed me as killed while heroically buying time for the team to complete their mission. You didn't correct the record, she said. It wasn't a question. What would be the point? My word against a decorated officer. Besides, I trailed off, wrestling with something I rarely admitted even to myself. Besides, you wanted to disappear. Eileen finished for me, to become someone else, someone who couldn't be betrayed again. I looked at her sharply. You're reading my mind now? She shook her head, a small, sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. No, just your pain. It echoes mine. We fell silent again, each lost in our own thoughts. The ship hummed around us, systems cycling through their endless routines. We're both byproducts of this war, I said. Finally, things that weren't supposed to survive their purpose. Yet here we are, she replied softly. Here we are, I agreed. In that moment, something changed between us. Not trust exactly. We were both too damaged for that. But recognition, perhaps. A mutual understanding that we carried similar wounds. I pushed off from the bulkhead. You should try to get some sleep. We'll be approaching the Helios trading post tomorrow. Need to refuel. She nodded but made no move to leave. As I turned to go, she spoke again. Dre, I paused, looking back at her. Thank you, she said simply. I didn't ask what for. We both knew. The Helios trading post was a sprawling collection of interconnected habitats and docking stations built into the remains of a shattered moon. It was neutral territory, a place where soldiers from both sides of the conflict could drink side by side, provided they checked their weapons and grudges at the door. I'd been coming here for years. The station master, an ancient man named Soren with a cybernetic eye and a talent for looking the other way, knew me well enough to ask no questions when I requested a quiet berth and away from the main traffic lanes. Keeping a low profile these days, Dre, he asked as he processed our docking clearance. Always, I replied, sliding him an extra credit chip. Any unusual traffic I should know about? Soren pocketed the chip without looking at it. Military transport came through yesterday. Black operations insignia, no flight plan filed. Crew kept to themselves. I felt a prickle of unease. Alliance or Confederacy? Alliance, he said, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on me. They were asking questions about unusual passengers. I kept my face deliberately neutral. Lot of unusual passengers come through Helios. That's the charm of the place. Soren nodded slowly. That it is. Just thought you should know. He handed me the docking authorization. Berth 17 level C, maintenance tunnel access like you prefer. I thanked him and turned to go, but his voice stopped me. Dre. The old man's expression was somber. Whatever you're mixed up in, be careful. Things are shifting out there. Old rules don't apply anymore. I gave him a nod and left, making my way back to where Aline waited in a shadowed alcove near the customs checkpoint. She'd insisted on coming with me rather than staying on the ship. I couldn't blame her. After years of captivity, the idea of being locked in anywhere, even voluntarily, was probably unbearable. She wore a hooded cloak I'd found in the ship's storage, her blue-tinted skin hidden in its shadows. Even so, she drew curious glances. Viridians weren't common on this side of the rift. We're clear, I told her quietly, but we may have company. Military transport docked yesterday, looking for unusual passengers. Eileen tensed beside me. Looking for me, you mean? Maybe, maybe not. Either way, we'll be quick. Refuel supplies, then back to the ship. Low profile. She nodded, pulling the hood closer around her face. We made our way through the bustling corridors of the trading post. Merchants hawked their wares from cramped stalls, the air thick with the smells of exotic foods and mechanical grease. Mercenaries and smugglers lounged in doorways, sizing up passers-by with practiced indifference. I led Eileen through the maze of passages, taking the less traveled routes where possible. We had almost reached the supply district when she suddenly grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. What is it? I asked, hand instinctively moving toward the concealed blaster at my hip. We're being followed, she whispered, not turning around. Two people, a man and a woman. They've been matching our pace since the central hub. I casually guided her toward a vendor selling navigation charts, pretending to browse while using the reflective surface of a display case to scan behind us. That's when I saw them, a man and woman in civilian clothes that were a little too nondescript, a little too practical. The woman had the coiled readiness of a predator, her eyes constantly scanning the crowd. The man's right hand never strayed far from his side, where I was willing to bet there was a concealed weapon. Hunters, I muttered. Not military, but something just as dangerous. Private contractors who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. What do we do? Eileen asked, her voice calm despite the danger. We split up, I said. You take the maintenance shaft 3 sections up. Code is 7734. It'll lead you back to our berth. I'll create a distraction, then circle around and meet you there. She looked at me, those dark eyes searching mine. And if you don't come back. The ship's prepped for solo flight. Emergency protocols are set to activate if I don't return within 6 hours. It'll take you to a safe haven, I know. Coordinates are already in the nav system. She blinked, surprised. You planned for this? I planned for everything, I replied. Now go. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just go. For a moment, I thought she might argue. Instead, she nodded once, then slipped away into the crowd, moving with the fluid grace of her species. I waited until she was out of sight, then deliberately headed in the opposite direction, making sure our followers spotted me. As I'd hoped, they both came after me, thinking Aline was still by my side. I led them through increasingly crowded sections of the station, ducking into a bustling cantina filled with off-duty miners and dock workers. The noise level was deafening, the air thick with smoke and the sharp tang of cheap synthetic alcohol. Perfect. I pushed my way to the bar, ordered a drink I had no intention of consuming, and waited. It didn't take long. The woman appeared first, sliding onto a stool 2 spaces down. The man positioned himself near the door, blocking the exit. Time for that distraction. I casually bumped into a massive freighter pilot next to me, spilling his drink down the front of his expensive-looking jacket. "What the hell?" he roared, shoving me backward. "Sorry, friend," I slurred, playing drunk. "Let me buy you another." "I don't want another drink," he growled, grabbing my collar. "I want compensation for my ruined clothes." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the female hunter shift her attention, divided between me and the developing confrontation. "Seems your friend is being unreasonable," came a silky voice from behind us. A tall, sleek woman with silver hair, cut in a severe military style, had appeared, her eyes cold as she assessed the situation. "Perhaps I can help settle this dispute." My instincts screamed danger. This wasn't some random peacemaker. The way she moved, the way her eyes missed nothing, this was someone else entirely. "No need," I said, breaking free of the pilot's grip with a practiced move. "Just a misunderstanding." "Oh, I think there's every need, Mr. Dre," she replied, her voice dropping to a register only I could hear. "Or would you prefer Sergeant Draven Malik, formerly of Alliance Special Operations?" I felt the blood drain from my face. No one had called me by my full name in years. "I think we should talk," she continued, "about your new companion." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, keeping my face neutral. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Don't you, a Viridian Resonance empath, high-value military asset, currently listed as escaped and dangerous?" She leaned in closer. "Or did you think cutting those neural cuffs made her disappear from the system?" In that moment, I knew I'd miscalculated badly. These weren't just hunters. This was a coordinated recovery operation. And they'd found us much faster than should have been possible. "Who are you?" I asked quietly. "Commander Krylovos," she replied, "Asset Recovery Division, and you, Sergeant Malik, have something that belongs to me." I barely made it back to the ship, having lost my pursuers in the maze of maintenance tunnels beneath the station. My mind raced with what I'd learned. Asset Recovery Division, a black ops unit I'd heard whispers about, dedicated to retrieving valuable military property at any cost. I found Aline in the cockpit, already running pre-flight checks. She turned when I entered, relief evident in her posture. "We need to go," I said breathlessly. "Now." "I've already initiated launch protocols," she replied. "What happened?" "Later," I promised. "Right now, we need to break dock and get clear of the station." She nodded and turned back to the controls. To my surprise, her fingers flew over the navigation panel with practiced ease. "You know how to fly this?" I asked, dropping into the co-pilot's seat. "I've observed you," she replied simply. "I learned quickly." I didn't have time to be impressed. "Disengage docking clamps on my mark. 3, 2, 1. The ship shuddered as the clamps released, and Aline smoothly guided us away from the berth. Alarms immediately began blaring through the comms. "Unscheduled departure," came Soren's voice over the channel. "Returning to dock immediately or defensive measures will be deployed." "Sorry, old friend," I muttered, cutting the communication link. "Aline, full thrust once we clear the outer markers." She complied without question, her movements fluid and precise. The moment we cleared the station's immediate control zone, she pushed the engines to maximum, throwing us both back against our seats as the ship leapt forward into open space. "They're pursuing," she said calmly, eyes on the sensor display. "2 vessels, military grade." I swore under my breath. "Plot a course for the scutum cloud. We can lose them in the radiation interference." For nearly an hour, we played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the debris field at the edge of the system. Aline proved to be a natural pilot, threading our ship through gaps I wouldn't have attempted, anticipating the pursuers' moves with uncanny accuracy. "You can sense them," I realized, watching her make a course correction a split second before one of the pursuing ships tried to cut us off. "You can feel what they're going to do." "Not precisely," she replied, her focus unwavering. "But I can feel their intentions. Their confidence or hesitation. It helps predict." Finally, we slipped into the dense radiation cloud that marked the boundary of the system. The pursuing ships held back, unwilling to risk their more sensitive systems in the destructive energy fields. Only when the sensors showed clear space did Aline relax her grip on the controls, her shoulders slumping slightly. "We've escaped. For now." I nodded, still processing what had happened. "They knew exactly who you were. They called you a military asset." Aline was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was hollow. I was never removed from the military registry. I'm still property to them. The word hung in the air between us, ugly and unavoidable. How did they find us so quickly? I wondered aloud. They didn't need to, she said quietly. I was never lost to them. She pulled back the collar of her tunic to reveal a small, almost invisible scar at the base of her neck. Subdermal tracker, standard procedure for high-value assets. Deactivated by the neural cuffs while I was captive, but once you cut them, it reactivated. I finished, a sick feeling in my stomach. I did this. I led them right to us. She shook her head. You couldn't have known. I should have. I insisted, anger at myself building. I should have been more careful. Should have checked. Should have. Stop, she said firmly, her dark eyes meeting mine. You gave me freedom. Whatever happens now, I've had days without chains. That's more than I ever expected to have again. I looked at her, really looked at her and saw something new in her expression, a quiet determination that hadn't been there before. We need to remove the tracker, I said. Yes, she agreed, but it won't be easy. They're designed to be difficult to extract. By difficult, I knew she meant painful, possibly fatal if not done correctly. I know someone, I said finally, an ex-military surgeon on Vega Prime. If anyone can remove it safely, she can. Aileen nodded, then turned back to the viewport. The stars stretched before us, cold and distant. I should leave, she said suddenly. At the next port. I should go. What? I was genuinely surprised. Why? They will never stop hunting me, and now they're hunting you too because of me. She looked down at her hands. I've brought enough suffering to others. I won't be the cause of yours. That's not your decision to make, I said more sharply than I intended. She looked up, startled by my tone. You don't get to decide what risks I take, I continued. Not after I just risked my neck getting away from those hunters. I didn't ask you to. No, you didn't. I chose to. Just like I'm choosing now to help you get that tracker out. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. You don't leave because of fear, Aline. You leave when you choose to, and for the right reasons. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment I thought I'd overstepped. Then to my shock, I saw tears well up in those fathomless dark orbs. One slipped free, trailing down her blue-tinted cheek like a silver thread. No one has ever let me choose, she whispered, her voice breaking. Not once in my entire life. Something in my chest tightened painfully. Without thinking, I reached out and gently brushed the tear away with my thumb. Well, I am, I said softly. It's your choice, but I hope you'll stay, at least until we get that tracker out. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, then met my gaze again. The tears were gone, replaced by a new resolve. I'll stay, she said, and then we'll see. We'll see, I agreed. What I didn't tell her was that Commander Krylovos, knowing my real name, changed everything. It meant they'd pulled my old military files, which meant they knew my patterns, my contacts, my hiding places. Nowhere I knew would be safe for long. We were, as the old saying went, in very deep waters now, and I had no idea how to get us out. We never made it to Vega Prime. 3 days into our journey, as we skirted the edge of contested space, the ship's proximity alarms screamed to life. A military cruiser had appeared on our sensors, dropping out of hyperspace less than 10 kilometers off our port side, close enough that our whole viewport filled with its massive hull. Alliance vessel Dauntless to unidentified craft. A voice crackled over our comms. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. I swore, fingers flying over the console as I tried to squeeze more power from our engines. They've got a tractor lock on us. We can't outrun them. Aileen stood perfectly still, her face a mask of resignation. It's her, isn't it, Commander Voss? I nodded grimly. Most likely. What do we do? She asked. I was already moving toward the weapons locker near the rear of the cockpit. We fight. Her eyes widened. Against an Alliance cruiser, that's suicide. Not the cruiser, I replied, pulling out my old service blaster and checking the charge. Just whoever comes through that airlock. We make it messy enough they might decide we're not worth the trouble. It was a desperate plan, but it was all I had. I'd spent the last 3 years taking impossible jobs, making myself valuable enough to the Alliance that they'd overlook my questionable status. But that protection was worthless now that I'd interfered with what they considered military property. Aileen watched me prepare with an unreadable expression. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You could surrender me. Tell them I manipulated you, used my abilities to control you." I paused, looking up at her. "Is that what you want?" "No," she admitted, "but I don't want your death on my conscience either." I chuckled despite the dire situation. "Considerate of you, but I've never been good at surrendering." The ship shuddered as the cruiser's tractor beam locked on fully. We were being pulled in inexorably to the massive docking bay visible in the distance. Aileen suddenly moved to the navigation console, her fingers darting over the controls. "What are you doing?" I asked, strapping on my combat harness. "There's another option," she said, not looking up. "If we overload the drive coils and vent plasma directly into their tractor beam emitter." I stared at her. "That would cause a massive feedback surge, could disable both ships." She nodded. "Or destroy us, but it would give us a chance." It was risky, insanely risky. The kind of desperate move that had maybe a 10% chance of working and a 90% chance of turning us both into cosmic dust. "Do it," I decided. Her fingers flew over the controls, rerouting power systems with a precision that told me she'd done something like this before. The ship's computer blared warnings as we pushed the drive beyond safety limits. "Ready," she said, finger hovering over the final command. "On your mark." I moved next to her, our shoulders almost touching as we stared at the approaching docking bay. "Aileen," I said quietly, "if this works, if we survive, what do you want? After the tracker is out, where would you go?" She looked at me, surprised by the question. For a moment, the imminent danger seemed to recede as something unspoken passed between us. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never had the luxury of wanting anything." "Think about it," I said. "Because when this is over, the choice is yours. I promise you that." She held my gaze for a heartbeat longer, then turned back to the console. "Ready?" I nodded. "Do it." She hit the command. The ship bucked violently as superheated plasma vented directly into the tractor beam. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the beam wavered, flickered, and suddenly our small craft was tumbling free, thrown clear by the explosion that bloomed where the beam had been. "Engines!" I shouted, grabbing the controls. Aileen was already there, her hands moving in perfect synchronization with mine as we fought to stabilize the ship. The cruiser loomed behind us, its forward section damaged, but its weapon system still active. The first volley of suppression fire streaked past our port side. "We need cover," Aileen said, scanning the sensor readings. "There's a debris field ahead. Old battle site." "Good eye." I veered toward the floating graveyard of destroyed ships. It would be dangerous to navigate, but it would also shield us from the cruiser's targeting systems. We plunged into the field, weaving between massive chunks of twisted metal. The cruiser followed but kept its distance, unwilling to risk its hull in the dense debris. Its sensors swept the area, continuously searching for our heat signature. "We can't hide here forever," I said, powering down non-essential systems to minimize our detectability. "Sooner or later, they'll send in smaller craft to flush us out." Aileen was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. "There's another option," she said finally, "but you won't like it. I'm open to suggestions at this point. We go back." She turned to face me, "to the Alliance command post on Terminus, where Corin is stationed." I stared at her. "You're right, I don't like it." "Think about it," she pressed. "Commander Voss is hunting us through unofficial channels. If she had proper authorization, that cruiser would have transmitted formal boarding codes. So she's operating outside the system, which means if we go directly to someone with higher authority, like Corin," I finished, beginning to see her logic. She nodded. "He has the clearance to access the military database. He could remove my tracker designation from the system entirely." "What makes you think he would help us?" "He wouldn't," she said simply. "Not willingly, but I can persuade him." The implication was clear. She would use her abilities, the same ones that had been weaponized against others, to force Corin's compliance. "That's a hell of a risk," I said. "Corin has an entire security detail, and even if we reached him, what you're suggesting is is using the very thing they turned me into against them. She finished, her voice hardening. Ironic, isn't it? I studied her face, saw the determination there, but also something else. A faint tremor in her hands that betrayed her fear. She was terrified of using her abilities this way, but she was willing to do it. For freedom. For both of us. Okay, I decided. But we do this my way, no suicide runs, no unnecessary risks. Your way, she agreed. I smiled grimly. Then let's go pay my old friend a visit. Breaking into an Alliance command post should have been impossible, but I hadn't spent the last 3 years taking impossible jobs without learning a few tricks. We abandoned our ship, too recognizable now, and hitched passage on a supply freighter bound for Terminus. Posing as maintenance contractors, we slipped past the outer security perimeters with forged credentials I'd acquired from an old contact, so the inner compound was trickier. Alliance Command took its security seriously with DNA scanners at every checkpoint and armed guards patrolling in pairs. We'll never get through, Eileen whispered as we watched from a service corridor. We don't need to, I replied. Corin will come to us. Terminus was a military base, but it was also home to the officers stationed there, which meant amenities, recreation areas, places where even decorated heroes went to unwind. The Officers Club, I explained. Corin never could resist showing off for an audience. He'll be there tonight, guaranteed. Eileen looked skeptical, but followed my lead as we made our way to the less secure civilian section of the base. The Officers Club was located in what had once been a luxury hotel repurposed when the Alliance took control of Terminus. By nightfall, we were in position. I'd acquired civilian clothes for both of us. Nothing flashy, just enough to blend in with the support staff. Eileen's distinctive blue skin was disguised with a temporary melanin adjustment patch. Not perfect, but enough to pass casual inspection in the dimly lit club. Remember, I told her as we approached the service entrance? We get him alone. We do this quietly. No one else gets hurt. She nodded, her expression determined. I'll need physical contact to establish the resonance link. I'll get you close enough, I promised. The club was exactly as I remembered from my days under Corin's command. All polished surfaces and calculated opulence designed to reinforce the hierarchy of power. Junior officers clustered at the outer tables while the inner circle gathered around the central bar where the real decisions were made. And there was Corin holding court just as he always had. Older now, with more medals on his chest, but that same smug smile as he regaled his subordinates with what I was sure were highly embellished war stories. There, I murmured to Eileen, who was posing as a server. The one in the center. Her eyes found him narrowed slightly. I feel him, she said softly. So much pride, and beneath it fear. Always fear. Can you do this? She took a deep breath. Yes, but I need to get closer. We waited watching until Corin excused himself from the group and headed toward the private restrooms at the back of the club. It was our best chance. Perhaps our only chance. I moved first, timing my approach to intercept him in the narrow corridor leading to the facilities. Corin was looking down at his comm device, not paying attention, when I stepped directly into his path. The collision was deliberate but seemed accidental. He looked up, annoyed, then froze as recognition dawned. Hello, Corin, I said quietly. Long time. His hand went immediately to his side where his service weapon would normally be, but civilian dress codes meant he was unarmed. Dre, he managed his face draining of color. You're supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint, I smiled without humor. We need to talk. His eyes darted around looking for security, for witnesses, for any way out. I don't know what you think you're doing, but he's not alone. Alina's voice came from behind him. She completed her approach while I held his attention. Corin turned, and in that moment of distraction, I grabbed his arm, steering him through a nearby door marked Staff Only. A line followed, closing the door behind us. The small storage room was dimly lit and cluttered with supplies. Perfect for our needs. What is this? Corin demanded, trying to maintain his authority despite his obvious fear. Do you have any idea what the penalty is for assaulting an Alliance officer? Probably similar to the penalty for abandoning your men and leaving them to die, I replied coldly. Or for trading sentient beings as property. His eyes flickered to Eileen, widening as he took in her appearance of the fading effects of the melanin patch, revealing hints of her true skin tone. "The Viridian," he breathed. "You actually kept it." "Her," I corrected, my voice hardening, "and her name is Elinin." Corin's face twisted into a sneer. "I see. You've gone native? Is that it? Fallen for an alien? How pathetic." I stepped forward, rage building, but Eileen put a hand on my arm. "He's trying to provoke you," she said softly. "His fear is overwhelming." Corin's gaze snapped to her. "Stay out of my head, creature." "We need access to the military database," I said, cutting to the chase. "Specifically the tracking registry for captured assets." Understanding dawned on his face, followed by a cruel smile. "So that's it. You want me to delete her tracking signal, make her disappear from the system?" "Can you do it?" I pressed. He laughed. "Of course I can. I have clearance for the entire prisoner database. But why would I help you? You're nothing but a deserter and a thief." "Because if you don't," Eileen said, stepping forward, "I will make you experience every moment of pain you've ever inflicted on others. Every betrayal, every abandonment, every life you sacrificed for your advancement." The color drained from his face. "You can't." "I can," she said simply, "and I will." For a moment, no one moved. Then Corin's face contorted with hatred. "You think I'm afraid of an alien's mind games? I've ordered the deaths of thousands. I've watched planets burn. There's nothing you can show me that would..." Eileen reached out and touched his forehead with 2 fingers. Corin froze mid-sentence, his eyes widening in horror. A strangled sound escaped his throat, and then he was on his knees, trembling violently. "Stop," he gasped. "Please stop." I watched, both fascinated and disturbed, as Eileen stood over him, her expression one of intense concentration. She wasn't enjoying this. I could see the strain in her face, the way her own body trembled, with the effort of channeling whatever emotions she was forcing him to confront. "Will you help us?" she asked, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Yes," he sobbed. "Anything, just make it stop." She removed her fingers from his forehead, and he collapsed forward, breathing heavily. "You'll take us to a secure terminal," I instructed. "You'll remove Eileen's tracking designation from the system, and you'll wipe any record of our presence here. Do you understand?" He nodded weakly, unable to meet our eyes. 20 minutes later, we stood in Corin's private office as he accessed the military database with shaking hands. Eileen watched over his shoulder, ensuring he made the correct entries. "There," he said finally, his voice hollow. "It's done. She's been removed from the tracking registry, listed as deceased during interrogation." Eileen stared at the screen, then at her hands as if expecting to feel some physical change. "That's it?" she asked softly. "I'm free." "According to the system, you don't exist anymore," Corin confirmed. A step forward, checking the terminal to verify his work. It appeared genuine. Eileen's designation had been completely purged from the active tracking system. "What now?" Corin asked, a hint of his old arrogance returning. "Going to kill me. That would be quite the scandal. Hero of the Outer Rim campaigns found murdered in his office." I considered him for a long moment. This man had betrayed me, left me for dead, had participated in a system that treated thinking, feeling beings as property. Part of me wanted to end him right there. Instead, I leaned down, bringing my face close to his. "Next time you give someone a chain, Corin," I said quietly, "make sure you can wear one yourself." I straightened up. "Let's go," I told Eileen. She hesitated, looking at Corin with an expression I couldn't read. Then she spoke, her melodic voice soft but clear. "I forgive you," she said simply, "not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your darkness with me any longer." The look on Corin's face as we left, confusion mixed with something like shame, was worth more than any revenge I could have taken. We left Terminus the way we'd come, quietly, anonymously slipping away on another supply freighter before Corin could change his mind or alert security. Neither of us spoke much during the journey. There was too much to process, too many emotions still raw and unsettled. It wasn't until we'd secured passage on a civilian transport headed for the outer colonies that Eileen finally broke the silence. "I felt it," she said, looking out at the stars streaking past the viewport, "when he deleted my designation from the system. Like a weight being lifted that I didn't even know I was carrying." I glanced at her profile, illuminated by the soft blue glow of hyperspace. We should still get that tracker removed. Just because they can't follow the signal doesn't mean it should stay in you. She nodded. Yes, but it's different now. It's my choice to remove it, not a necessity for survival. That subtle distinction meant everything I realized. The difference between running from chains and choosing freedom. We made our way to Vega Prime as originally planned, seeking out Dr. Ilara Cade, an ex-military surgeon who'd walked away from the Alliance years ago after witnessing one too many ethical compromises. She operated a small clinic in the colony's old industrial sector, treating those who couldn't afford the official medical facilities or who needed to stay off the grid. Military-grade subdermal tracker, she mused, examining the scans of Eleni's neck. Nasty piece of work, designed to cause maximum damage if tampered with. Can you remove it? I asked. Ilara's weathered face creased in a confident smile. I've taken out dozens of these. Alliance keeps changing the design, but the principle remains the same. She looked at Eileen. It won't be pleasant, but I can do it. Eileen met her gaze steadily. I understand. I'll prep the surgical suite, Ilara said, gathering her equipment. Give me 20 minutes. When she left the room, I turned to Eileen. You don't have to do this now. We could wait, find someone with better facilities. No, she interrupted gently. This is right. This place, this moment. A small clinic that helps the forgotten. It feels appropriate. I couldn't argue with that. Instead, I asked the question that had been on my mind since our escape from the cruiser. Have you thought about it? What do you want to do after this? She looked down at her hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. I have, she said softly, but I'm not sure you'll like my answer. My heart sank a little, though I tried not to show it. Tell me anyway. She raised her eyes to mine. I want to stay with you. A small smile touched her lips. If you'll have me. Relief and something warmer flooded through me. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. The surgery took just over an hour. I paced the small waiting area, ignoring curious glances from the clinic's other patients. When Ilara finally emerged, wiping her hands on a sterile cloth, her expression was triumphant. Got it, she announced, holding up a small metallic device no bigger than my thumbnail. Nasty little thing. Had to be careful with the neural attachments, but she'll be fine. Can I see her? She's resting, but yes, just keep it brief. She needs recovery time. Eileen lay on the narrow medical bed, a small bandage at the base of her neck, the only sign of the procedure she'd undergone. Her eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as I approached. Hey there, I said softly. Hey yourself, she replied, her voice slightly hoarse. Is it done? I nodded. It's done. You're truly free now. No chains, no trackers, no designations in any system. She smiled a real smile that transformed her face. What happens now? Now, I pretended to consider. Now I think we find ourselves a new ship, something with better engines, maybe actual living quarters instead of converted storage compartments. And then, I sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and then we go wherever we want, do whatever we choose together. Her hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with my own. The gesture was so simple, yet so profound, a freely given touch instead of one compelled by force or fear. I'd like that, she said quietly. 3 weeks later, we stood in the cockpit of our newer vessel, a refurbished Meridian-class courier that I'd purchased with the last of my savings. It wasn't luxurious, but it was fast and reliable, with separate living quarters and an enhanced navigation system. Eileen had taken to modifying the ship's neural interface, adding what she called emotional resonance dampeners to the pilot's controls, a system she'd designed herself that used her understanding of emotional patterns to create a calmer, more intuitive flying experience. Done, she announced, closing the access panel she'd been working on. Want to test it? I smiled. You first. Your design, your test flight. She looked surprised, then pleased. She settled into the pilot's seat and placed her hands on the controls. The ship hummed to life around us, systems responding to her touch with a smoothness I'd never experienced before. It works, she said, a note of wonder in her voice. It actually works. I laid a hand on her shoulder. Of course it works. You built it. She looked up at me, her dark eyes shining. Where do we go now? I gazed out at the stars visible through the viewport, infinite possibilities stretching in all directions. Somewhere without chains, I suggested. She nodded, a smile spreading across her face as she engaged the engines. The ship responded instantly, gliding away from the docking station and toward open space. We sat side by side in the cockpit, shoulders touching, as we watched the galaxy unfold before us. Not running now, but moving forward. Not surviving, but living. This time, I said quietly, we're not survivors. We're builders. Eileen reached over and took my hand, her fingers warm against mine. Builders, she repeated. I like that. The ship accelerated, carrying us into the unknown. Two broken pieces from a broken war, somehow fitting together to make something whole, something new, something free. And for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: hope. If this story resonated with you, if you enjoyed this journey of freedom, redemption, and finding connection in the most unexpected places, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, telling me what part touched you the most. Was it Dre's initial act of defiance, Eileen's journey to reclaim her autonomy, or perhaps the moment they both realized they were stronger together than apart? And if you want to hear more stories like this, tales of humanity's resilience, courage, and capacity for change across the stars, hit that subscribe button. Each week I bring new journeys across the cosmos, exploring what makes us human even in the most inhuman circumstances. Remember, in the words of Dre, you don't leave because of fear, you leave when you choose to maneuver. Make the choice to join us for more adventures. Until next time, this is Stellar Narrative signing off.